Hi, I'm Matt from The Loom of Time.
And I'm Nick from Evocatus.
And welcome to the Tomb of Lime podcast. This is episode 8, where we'll be finalizing our track-by-track exploration of Nihilreich with the song The Fight for the Subhuman, the ballad at the end of the album.
Oh.
So, Nick.
Hello, Matt.
How do you end an album?
Haha.
What do you think is the considerations that go into something like picking the last song for this format of music that we love, that we call the LP, the album?
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, I keep asking you tricky questions. I might be doing it deliberately.
You might be.
Yeah.
So we've done it a couple of different ways before.
Mm-hmm.
But most recently, it's been a collection of songs that existed without any particular order.
Yep.
From the outset.
Define the order within.
And then define the order thereafter.
Okay.
Which was a challenge. It's a challenge to find like the order of the songs, which is the song that should open the album. Is it a song that people are already familiar with for whatever reason, whether it's from live shows, or is it another thing entirely where you're just, picking one of the songs as a single and you bang that at the start of the album, or is it a really strong album opener? But for the end, it's kind of same but different. It needs to be a song that's going to capture or sort of summarize the feeling of the album in its entirety.
Yep.
Even though it can be a song to stand on its own.
Yes.
Which, these all are. To have a song, and you might not even have a song that has, a summary of the feeling of the whole record or the collection of songs before they have a particular order. In your case, I think, I'm not sure how intentional it was. I'm sure you're going to go into it, but you definitely have done that, I think. I think the way that you've done the order and particularly the selection of the last track has answered the question for me.
Okay.
I knew the answers before the question, though, in this case. It is a tricky one, especially if you hadn't set out to write an album closer from the get-go.
So, I mean, if you could write an album closer, what do you think that you would... What things would you go for when you're writing that thing? Is it more important for it to have a feel that's the same as the rest of the album, or is it more like what feeling you want to leave the listener with because that's the last song that they hear? That's
a tricky one. There was a piece of review or some such thing that I read about a record where the songs would leave the listener wanting more.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It kind of, you could take it two ways. It could be like, oh man, this music's so great, I want to hear more of that.
Yes.
And that is leaving the listener wanting more.
Yes.
The other thing is, at the end of the record and the listener's going, oh man, is it finished already?
Yeah, okay.
Like, that's not enough.
Okay.
That's bad.
Yeah.
I want more because there was not enough. Kind of like this gingerbread house. There's clearly not going to be enough.
No. What are you going to do?
What do you do? So I think if you're able to capture and sort of convey a whole mood, especially when if you're listening to a record on its own from in its entirety from start to finish, and there's not going to be another song or another album, straight away after it, something that can just simmer. Or maybe not the song simmer, but it leaves you, the listener, simmering on what you've just heard.
Yeah.
In reflection of what you've just experienced.
Yeah. So, you use the word simmer. That's interesting. I had the word resonance in my head. That feeling of
same sort of deal. Yeah.
Equilibrium. Like things have sprung up and done something chaotic, and now they've left you with like throwing a rock into a pool. You know, it settles down to a point where everything's back to normal, and you know, you could hit play again and then do the cycle again, but you need to come down to this level where it's back to finality.
Cleansing the palate.
Yeah. I guess that's one way of thinking about it. But I guess I did give some thought to what different people do when they're picking their last song, and I wondered, you know, is it a consideration? Do you think that some people will be committed to listening to the album all the way through, and you know that person's going to listen to the last song,
sure.
But other people might just be browsing, as it were, and if they might like this the first song, they might get a couple of songs in, but they might not get all the way through to the end of the album. So do you think people select songs thinking that maybe they won't all get heard by the person that listens to it?
Like as an artist who has to arrange these songs, they pick their shittest song and bung it at the end of the record for fear of, you know, it doesn't matter if people don't hear it or not. It's better if they don't.
I thought maybe they would finish strong, because for the people that they know are going to listen to the end of it, they want them to think of the rest of the album like the song they've just heard, right?
So you've picked a different target audience already.
But for those other people that won't maybe listen to it, you put a couple of strong songs at the beginning.
Yeah.
So maybe there's 3 or 4 strong songs at the beginning, then a patch of whatever, and then a strong finish, so that you capture everyone. You know, I wondered if that was a consideration, and whether that I don't know, post's middle hump there was a place of weakness in album construction.
I guess it's like an issue, a conundrum where it's not just exclusive to music, but whenever you're making decisions that are going to affect someone else's or someone else, if you try to keep everyone happy, you'll end up keeping no one happy. So you got to go with one thing.
Yeah. That being said, though, you also don't want to just make a bad thing.
Sure, that's right. I don't think anyone sets out to make a bad thing unless you're making black metal. If you can stick with a thing that you think is good as an artist, and I mean, there's reasons that we've just sort of mulled over, you're going to attract a certain listener or impress a certain listener, and there'll be other people who that idea or that concept will be lost on because they, like the Spotify listener, for example, they hear something and then it takes them to your music, and then there's a song that they hear of yours, and then it's on to the next thing. Yeah. Unless it's like, oh man, what is this? Loom of Time. I'm just going to put this whole album on. And there's people that do that, right? Yeah.
Sure, there's a market share of both of those types of people, yeah.
That opposed to the people who buy the record and have it in their hand. More likely, because with this, I can just skip through the tracks. I can go pick a track that I want to listen to. But on vinyl, it's less easy. And you're more likely, I think, as a vinyl listener to put it on and it'll run its course the whole way through.
Yes, making a mixtape from vinyl is a lot trickier too.
Whether or not you've been distracted and left the room, and the record just plays out while you're gone or whatever, I guess that's a possibility. But I guess again, you can't please everyone.
Yeah, as many different people as there's different ways of listening to or enjoying art or whatever it might be.
That's right.
And I imagine people who say make film don't think that the person who started watching it's not going to get to the last scene. And so
I would definitely be asleep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you probably, when you make an album, you have to make that same decision. You have to go, all right, I'm going to assume that everyone's going to listen to this from start to finish. If you're thinking of things like song order construction.
Sure. Yeah. That's how that's what you would hope for your listener. Yeah.
But, you know, I think about all the records that I listen to, and there's so many different ways that people do this. And like, I guess the way we went with is more like the ending ballad. I know it's not a strict ballad in the strictest sense of things, because it has a small amount of screaming and other stuff like that in there. But I think it fills that gap. It has that function, as it were. It's
definitely the ballad out of those 6 songs.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as extreme metal goes, it's a ballady kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, you know, because we can do whatever we want, it's still got a feeling like it's still part of the album. It's not so different that it doesn't fit on there.
That's right.
Or at least I would hope.
Like sonically, yeah. I mean, it's the most different, but it's not so different that it doesn't belong there. And lyrically, like the themes, still very much belongs on this record for sure.
But yeah, I did want to do the ballad thing. I mean, I think it's something that I've loved about a lot of records. Just the way that a rock band can show a different side of themselves, but still have it fit the theme. But also that it does that thing where at the end of the album brings it down and into that resonant or sizzling or whatever you want to call it. And that I think was the nice function of the ballad being at the end on those classic records where I've listened and they've done that.
Yeah.
And so I guess I did want to do something.
Did you find that to be common in your exploration of looking for ballads and how other bands close albums?
I think it was...
the ballad last, or is it somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it happens a lot of, many different ways, right? But I think because it's quite different and it's the last thing that the album leaves you with, when you hit a ballad as the last song, it really leaves an impression and you really go, something's changed, something's different. This is an interesting way to do things. And, if you've just spent the last 8 tracks, whatever, listening to one kind of thing and this has brought it into something different, it kind of makes an impression on you. And I think, there's a song called Rainbow Eyes at the end of Long Live Rock and Roll by Rainbow. That's like the classic, like it's rock and roll all the way through and then a ballad at the end.
Yeah.
But I think there's other places where, like I think Dream Theater maybe a couple of times have done what feels like an album, and they've got, bunch of typical songs and then a ballad. And then a really long, nasty, 20-minute epic thing after that. It's almost like they've gotten an album and finished it, and then they've stuck this epic thing on the end. And I felt like almost then something about being epic is another way of finishing an album with the same kind of function. Right? One thing I'm thinking of is the Winter Sun record, because they're self-titled. Their longest song is last.
Right.
And in a way, I think maybe that was because they're easing people into it almost, because it goes from the shortest song to the longest song on that record. But at the same time, an epic song, a big ending fulfills that resonance, sizzling kind of feeling, but it's not a ballad. So there's definitely more than one way to do it.
It would definitely summarize a record. I know Malakesh do that too on Enki and Epigenesis. The last songs are epic, with big, like, long time repeating riffs that just get bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. Which is you don't often associate thrash metal and epic so much, like you would with. I guess it's pretty progressive music anyway.
But it's got an in-your-face feeling. Generally. So, and
there's ballads in both of those records in the middle. When I say ballads, they're like just Middle Eastern folk music, but not thrash metal.
Yes, So I mean, yes, I suppose bands do like to give you little bits of respite throughout the runtime of a record, if they're going for that sort of thing, so that you can almost sort of better appreciate
what's to come.
And I think that's like even a human psychology thing where, when you're learning something, they say to take these little breaks because you learn really well the thing at the beginning and then the thing at the end, and the middle part kind of gets lost.
With his methods, Ebbinghaus obtained a remarkable set of results. He was the first to describe the shape of the learning curve, to describe primacy and recency effects, the fact that early and late items in a list are more likely to be recalled than middle items. Robert A. Wozniak.
Yeah, so humans tend to learn the beginning and the last thing better than the stuff in the middle. So the more breaks you take, the more you chop that up, the more beginnings and ends you've got.
Oh, yeah.
And so you kind of... So, I mean... Maybe it's the same in music almost, where you have cycles in an album where you have to have these little. I mean, naturally, the end of a song does that, right? The songs end and the next one begins, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it does that naturally, but on the scale of an album, I guess you can do that as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's say Tartarus. I mean, you mentioned that was almost a thematic choice to put it at the end because you had the name for the album, but I think that is a pretty epic song as well.
Yeah. it's a pretty simplistic way that we selected that to be the last song. Like you say, it's epic. I guess in hindsight, without meaning to do it, it's a summary of the album in its entirety. But the corniest part of it is that the record is the path to the song Tataris.
Look, I mean, if the song hadn't have been suitable as an end song, you'd been like, oh,
exactly.
Nothing in this works as an end song.
Now, what we've done in the past is, and other bands do it too, like even Opeth does it, is you just bash a B-side at the end of the record, which can ruin that idea that the last track on the album is going to be a summary or of the record, because you've just now got something at the end of the record that is nothing to do with the other songs at all. You know, like I think it's on Morning Rise.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of like old demos that they just bashed on the end of that album that have really bad production.
Yeah, okay. But that's like a special addition, right? That wasn't like part of the album, was it?
Well, I don't know. It's the only version of the album I've listened to. So
I felt like there was a complete album in there, and then there was some stuff on the end. And it was like, if you
that's
hit
probably
pause at
the
the
case.
end, it might have been the case. But like, I'm thinking of like Ghost Reveries. I think it's Ghost Reveries ends in a ballad.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So that's
and
another
that's
example.
silky smooth too.
Yeah. And again, I think I may have mentioned this before, but I think he abandoned the concept of that album for the sake of that one song that he just felt was so strong.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's again another example of where the ballad comes in. But yeah, after all this big heavy stuff and epic stuff on that album, it's still nice to come down to this resonant level.
I've just got goosebumps thinking about that actually.
Yeah.
What an excellent way to end that record.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, all these thoughts, they go into the choice where we want to do something slightly different. But you know, I think I did have some reviews that were saying that it was the most different, not for reasons of songwriting almost, but just like, I think maybe they cottoned onto the fact that it wasn't as stylistically diverse as the other songs on the album.
That song wasn't as stylistically diverse as the other songs. Is that what you mean?
The Fight for the Subhuman wasn't as stylistically diverse as the other 5 tracks on the album, yeah. And so in that way, it was unlike anything and perhaps didn't fit as well with the rest of it. But in my mind, like, I kind of wrote it the same as I wrote the other ones in like the structure. It was just, moves along, progresses, morphs, changes, and gets to the destination it's going to.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
But I just wasn't using the trappings of the genres that I had used on previous songs for the most part.
That's right, yeah. When you dissect it like that, as, like you say, the song progresses through and changes from one section to the next, the same as all the other songs on the record.
Yeah.
But to the casual listener, it's so different. And in itself as one song standing alone, it doesn't change stylistically so much. Unless you think about it, unless you really dissect it.
No, yeah, but it was kind of strange for me to hear that, because to me, writing it felt the same. You know, the process was the same, so it didn't feel different to me writing it. So it kind of felt like, but you know, they singled it as different. I mean, and I know apart from the obvious reasons, but that still felt a bit weird, and it made me a little self-conscious now for future releases. In that, I felt like maybe I'm still writing the same kind of thing that I did here.
Was the ballad a misstep?
Well, not that, but is what I feel is like a continuation of what I've done here. Actually way more different than I realized, because if I thought those were the same and people, when they listen to it, it feels different. Maybe I've misjudged my writing process or something, but I mean, that's maybe just a time will tell thing. But either way, I'm happy enough that it fits well enough on the album, and it's meant to be a bit different. It's just, as long
I
as
think it absolutely belongs because it's different. Because the other songs are stylistically similar to each other, but quite chaotic in themselves. And the last song is different to the other songs to the casual listener. But because it's different and the other songs are different in themselves, it kind of fits anyway.
Yeah. it's weird to find out the different ways that people enjoy music, because when you meet someone that you find enjoys the same thing as you, and then you discover that they enjoy all these different things about it that you don't necessarily like or enjoy about that thing.
Yeah.
It's like I guess it's nice that there's more than one dimension in which people can enjoy certain things, especially music, but a whole lot of other stuff as well. And yeah, I guess it's one of the things I like about music is that there's all these different ways that you can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's testament to, you know, this kind of change in pace in a song, but that still people can find similar or different reasons to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's also cool when you listen to, say, side projects or things that musicians that you like have done, but doing something in a very different style. You might not find the things that you enjoyed about their other music in there, but it's still good or whatever.
For other reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a way to kind of almost broaden someone's appreciation for any given art form as well, as to sort of sneak a different reason to enjoy something on the album. Like it's weird to, I guess, enjoy production as a thing. And I don't suppose many people would listen to an album and go, man, the music sucks, but the production's so good that this is my favorite album. But, you know, there's
Nickelback.
Well, but there's elements of all these different ways that you can enjoy music. But yeah, to me, writing that last song felt like I was writing it in the same way that I wrote those other songs. So to me, on this side of the writing process, it felt the same as the rest of the album. But I guess I understand that it may not be the case for the listener, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get black metal fans that, you know, like the sound of the rest of the record. Lots of black metal going on. And there's like 1 4-second snippet of black metal in Subhuman.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not for me.
Yeah, I don't think there's any blasts on this song. It might be the only one without blasts on it. I don't know. Also, the very intro, this is actually, it might be the only song without blast beats on it, and the only song with any acoustic guitar on it. So the intro to this song has an acoustic guitar on it. And I think once the intro's finished, there's no acoustic guitar in the rest of the song. It was just...
And there's a solo.
Oh, yeah, you're right, there is. Okay, so those two bits are the only bit of acoustic guitar on the album as a whole. But, still felt right. Like, that intro is basically a rip-off of the first track of an Angel Witch album called As Above, So Below. I think the song's called... No, I forget. Anyway,
cool.
But it's really similar. The
Roll
song,
it in the video.
Yeah, the song, their song changes totally after that intro and goes into drastically different territory to mine does.
Sure.
But I really like the feel of that that intro, and so I just, obviously it's different chords and notes and things but I think if you heard it, you'd be like, oh, yeah, okay. I see where that comes from.
Yeah.
But after that, it's almost minimalistic because it's not a riff-heavy song. It uses chords more than it does just chugs and riffs and notes and things. So there's a lot more space in this song as well. Like there's parts where it's just it gives a lot of character to a section.
There's more black metal in there for you.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, they call tremolo picking where you're picking as fast as you can, and they call the tremolo effect was going 1 1 1 1 1 1.
Okay.
But functionally, they're quite diverse in how they work. But I never really thought about how that they were actually kind of related. But yeah, anyway, not that kind of tremolo. But yes, and then a small amount of screaming. Yes, a guitar solo and an acoustic guitar solo. I think that was probably just indulgence, really. Like. It's like two guitar solos, right? Back to back.
Right.
And
one acoustic, like flamenco-y almost, and the other one like big soaring lead part.
Yeah. I think it kind of functions as that similar sort of chorus feeling, except no vocals. It was just the lead guitar instead doing the energy there, and then it cuts back down into almost nothing after that. and then there's a long weird section at the end. There's quite like a big gap of silence where there's the vocals are just delaying over and over almost eternally, right?
I listened to this song today. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, I've listened to this song a lot, but I
Yeah,
listened to
you've
it
heard
today,
before.
and there's that part that you're talking about. There's that part of silence where the vocals just disappear into an impossible delay.
Yep.
And it's such a heavy hitting part of how the song feels to a listener, especially if you're in a really immersive listening environment where you have no other distractions.
Yeah, okay. So the big contrast between what you're left with.
Yeah, that's right.
And because there's no warning that other bit's going to come in.
Not at all, no.
Yeah.
And it hit me exactly the same the first time I ever heard it here.
Yeah, okay.
Sitting right in front of the speaker and having never heard it in my life before. And it's like about as loud as you can handle. Right in front of the speaker, just soaking it in. And I remember the way it made me feel, like it felt like I just melted in the spot right there. So my question is, how much control did you have over that happening in the final product?
So I think
versus...
in my demos, I wanted something like that to happen, but I didn't know what. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So I sang the last lyric there and then had, 20 bars of silence. I just left it there and then wrote the rest of the song after that. And then when in that huge gap of silence, I'm like to Mita, make it...
do the zazz.
Do infinite delay. Do something weird. I don't know what you do or how you do it, but make it so that it just
so you let go,
melts and weird and gets weird. And
you let go of some creative control.
I did.
Excellent. So good.
I guess I kind of knew something had to fill there, but I didn't want it to be musical per se.
Sure.
I just wanted it to be sonic.
Sound. Yeah.
And so the details of how that delay works is not in my hands, no. I was again, it's a good opportunity to get the engineer to do, like, obviously they make a lot of creative decisions when they're doing their mixing and engineering and so on, but to really let go of the reins, and because a lot of the album is really planned out meticulously and demoed entirely beforehand and so on and so on. But there are moments that where you allow for the random, the chaotic, the unpredictable things to happen. And yes, that was definitely one of those sections. So
that's really good. I had thought about that. I wonder how much control that you'd kind of relinquished at that point.
Like, there's plenty of music I hear all over the place where I wonder how they come up with these sections of song that don't feel like they could have, there's no music theory that you could have taught to teach how to write that thing, because it's basically just feeding it through a lot of things that we don't really understand.
Yeah.
Plugins and pieces of gear and whatever to get
all these pedals you have in front of you where you can just strike one note on the guitar and then just fiddle with all the knobs while that's ringing out. And see what happens.
And like, there are of course people who understand every electronic signal that's going through those things, but we are not required to know those things in order to be able to twiddle the knobs and operate them.
Sure.
So and in that way it's nice, because it's almost like it's one of the things that the robots still don't have on us yet, these the ways that we can just feed a whole lot of inputs into something that's going to create something we don't even know what it's going to come out as. But we just
and the robot can't decide if it sounds good or not.
No,
but I can.
Yes, and we let it do its thing, and then we just go, that sounds good, man. And so that was just one of those things. So I'm not sure how deliberately contrasty I was. Obviously that last final kind of section is supposed to be hard hitting when it first comes in, but that recurring delay loop, it's like almost like a micro sleep, if you know what I mean, to the listener. It's like it could go on forever. It could go on for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You wouldn't know
until it snaps you back in the room.
And then a lot of the vocals on the song are quite heavily affected. I think there's lots of distorted bits and delayed bits and so on. And I think it was just because at that point of the album, I think it's like the atmosphere is more important than the content, if you know what I mean. So, but
the atmosphere becomes the content.
Which is not something I'd done a lot of on any of the other parts of the record, because there was too meticulously. There wasn't enough space in it, you know.
It was full.
Yeah, it was full, exactly. Which is fine, you know. A lot of music really benefits from the space it puts in there, and I really appreciate that stuff. Like, you know, Pink Floyd is the master of that. I know.
Yeah.
Stephen Wilson has said similar things about having space in the music. And,
Going on into like stuff like post metal, stuff like that has a lot of space, atmosphere.
Yeah, I know. I feel like that stuff's kind of emotionally mature as well, and it makes us feel feelings and so on. But I didn't mind not doing a lot of that stuff because I had a different thing going on.
Yeah, that's right.
But for this final moment, you know,
you found it.
Yeah. It was a chance to do something like that and leave you with the right feeling finishing the album. But then again, right at the very, very end, an acoustic guitar comes back in.
Yeah.
And this is
with the recurring fading out.
Yeah. And that was probably added after I had finished the song.
Is that right?
Yeah, because it's, you know, maybe you didn't catch
Spoiler.
on to this, but yeah, it's the intro of the next track that didn't make it onto the album.
Yeah.
So, so I'd obviously written Admirable O Daedalus, Your Son, the Wings of Ingenuity, which we released separately, and then gone back to this one and added the intro of that as a guitar piece onto the end of this album.
Yeah.
And I think I felt that was important because we needed another thing to connect the two together so that it didn't seem so random and nonsensical that we would really... Yeah. So I know, because they are so different, I still wanted to make that statement that, hey... it's
Remember
the same
us?
band
Yeah.
releasing these two things. We're allowed to release what we want in these styles if we want to. And I wanted to make sure that there was continuity there so that there was something tying them all together.
Because otherwise the continuity might be entirely lost on to the casual listener between Wings and Nile Reich, because you're not even performing vocals on Wings.
No.
So to the first time or otherwise unfamiliar listener, it's a different band altogether.
Yeah. But, yeah, again, that's another thing that we are allowed to do.
Oh, 100%.
And I wanted to make sure that people realize that because, you know, I didn't want to suffer the fate of bands who feel like they're pigeonholed into whatever the thing was and they have to come up with a new band just so they can explore a new idea.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that song next time, I think.
Yeah.
But yes, so the very end of this album is the beginning of the next little EP single, whatever it is.
At the time, the first time I'd ever heard this record here, and that was the end of the record, and it had that acoustic guitar fading melody that I think back on it now, and I don't think it would be the same without it. Like, it's absolutely necessary to have that bit, regardless of the intro to Wings.
Yes. Yeah, I think so as well. It's like that resonant part we've created with the delayed vocals kind of gets destroyed by the ending section there.
Yeah.
But then we kind of regain it in a way.
Yeah.
But, you know, that little acoustic guitar outro there, it also, I feel like, although we've had a lot of resonance and we've had a lot of wind down and we've had a lot of, you know, sizzle and we've had our emotions and we've felt things and so on, that little piece still feels like it's the beginning of something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe I'm biased because I knew it was the intro to the other song, but
No,
I
I know
feel
what you
like,
mean, though.
yeah, it still feels like it's not settled
It's not
down
finished.
completely. Yeah, it's like a to be continued.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a little spicy thing at the end just to go, oh, something else is going on.
Where did you get it from? What was the inspiration for that particular snippet?
Well,
and it's got a bass line as well, like.
Yeah. Basically, when I started writing the next song, it was just there are lots of interesting ways that. So I guess I wanted to write something purely orchestral to introduce that song. You know, it's that technique turns up a lot in movie soundtracks actually.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to start with it, and then I just built on it basically. So it's got a lot of tension in it, and it doesn't quite resolve easily, and it just allows me to build and build and build and get into whatever I'm getting into.
So you just pinched that and stuck it on the end of your other song.
Yes.
Yeah.
To act as a bridge that obviously didn't destroy because it's not the exact same sound file. Like it's, you know, the other one starts with strings and this one starts with acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
So it it's its own version of it,
Yeah.
specifically for the end of this album.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we'd never done that other song, I think it still works, but it's still
Absolutely.
it creates a tension that is never quite resolved, I guess, until you perhaps listen to the next one as well.
Kind of gives you anxiety.
Yeah, but not because it's so short and quiet and reasonable. I feel like it doesn't ruin everything else you've just felt over the last song that we've just listened to. You know, I know that Dream Theater, for a couple of albums, they didn't use musical motifs, but they had a sound, whatever it might be, that they used as the intro to the next album.
Mm-hmm.
So on one, it was just the sounds of birds chirping or something, and then on one album it was just one chord, and then it fades in on the next album as it faded out from the last one.
Okay.
So they only did it for a couple of albums, but I pinched the kind of idea, but I made it more concrete. It's more musical and direct, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
It's a direct lift from one album to the other, but done in a different instrumentation and so on. But just a little flourish thing there, that kind of thing we like to do just to create interest, I suppose it is. Yeah,
it definitely worked for me.
That album listening party, we listened to the other song directly after this one, did we? Probably did.
I think so. Probably after a short break. Obviously change the record over.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of gathering themselves after
I think
the song finishes.
Maybe I wasn't sure if I wanted to play that one there at all, because it wasn't really part of the album, or it was getting released differently, or...
We did though, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. But after everyone sort of gathered themselves, because I think there was a whole lot of
recharge their
applause and like these ones.
So lyrically, this one, I guess
it's quite dark.
Nah.
That's not like this album.
I feel like this one is not as directly articulate of the ideas that I had for it. Like, it's almost a bit more general in the way it presents its ideas, and that, maybe if I explain what I was going on in my head, I've thought myself that maybe this is an idea worth revisiting in more detail, because this one kind of doesn't fully realize what I was thinking about as I was going through it. But I guess generally, when we're thinking about all the other themes on this album, there's the meaning of life and so on, but there's also morality, ethics, which is how you decide what's right and what's wrong, or how to decide between two rights or two wrongs or whatever. And so I was dwelling on the idea of how humans decide what is right, and how to choose what to do the right thing and so on. Because it's no point talking about ethics, like how to decide between two rights or two wrongs, if you haven't decided whether they're actually both right and one of them's not actually just wrong.
Sure.
And so I feel like a lot of people just ignore that idea because they're pretty confident about that they know what's right and what's wrong. And obviously I'm here to shake people's confidence in their most deepest beliefs. So, we need to get on that. But this one was like I guess I was having a couple of thoughts, but one of the thoughts was I got this idea in my head that maybe one of the things that is more important than we give credit for determining what people think is right or wrong is not ancient religious texts or philosophical works or whatever, that it might be actually technology. And I thought about these periods in history where technology seemed to precede directly a change in the public opinion of something. Okay. So one thing you might think of is music piracy. It's like before we had CD burners and before we had Napster and so on, I don't think anyone was out there going, yes, piracy is the best and it's reasonable and everyone does it, because no one did it, I guess. Well, there were people, obviously. But when it became really accessible to people, I think people's opinion on how right or wrong it was changed.
Yeah.
Okay. Another example I thought of was, this might be a bit dark to think about, but human slavery became pretty out of fashion pretty quickly after the Industrial Revolution, after we started mechanizing and industrialize how we did things, and we didn't need the slaves anymore to do those jobs so much, or the rich bourgeois or whatever it was. Suddenly people started getting really antsy about human rights for this reason. Like, I think it was, mid 1700s to 1800s and maybe early 1800s as well. A lot of people started to put in these abolition of slavery acts in Britain and the US and whatever, and they had a civil war over it and everything. It just seemed maybe a little coincidental that at the same time we started to make machines that could do the works that slaves were doing. And if that's related, then it's not a hopeful thing to think about when it comes to the human being, if that the catalyst for being angry about slavery was that we didn't need them to do our stuff anymore.
Another convenience.
Yeah. And so, that's one option. The other thing would be like the contraceptive pill and things like infant formula. Okay, before these things came along, it was almost like a biological, necessity that the woman would take care of the child, because if they didn't get the breast milk, the man couldn't do it.
Sure.
Okay, so after we got the contraceptive pill, suddenly women can choose not to get pregnant, and they can choose not to rear their child after the invention of the formula. And suddenly women's rights explodes after that, because I think it was maybe in the 60s or just before the contraceptive pill started to come in. And then suddenly when they've got the choice, it becomes a big issue that this piece of technology...
Because there's a choice.
Yeah, because this technology has allowed the choice to flourish, as it were.
Yep.
So there's all these points in time where we're seeing... And, my correlation here is just, it might be way off. I might not be understanding it at all. It's just...
Oh, it's an observation nonetheless.
Yeah, and that's right. And all I can do is make the observation and then go, oh, is it? And that's kind of what the lyrics are doing, I guess. But in my mind, one of the things that people get hung up on now when they try to decide what's right and what's wrong is what future generations will think about it. And people like to think that they're on the right side of history. And when people look back at the way history has unfurled, they like to think if they were back there then, they would have been on the side that they are on now. Okay? And so, they like to think, they would have opposed this thing that they oppose now if they lived back then, when almost nobody did. But statistically, you probably wouldn't almost. If it was down to statistics, because everyone accepted a certain terrible thing back then, you probably would have too, unless there's some other controlling force to how you decide what's right and what's wrong. But I wanted to think about how important is it to think about what future generations will think about how we do things, and should it be an important thing for us to think about how they'll think in order to make our decisions. Like, I know there's a lot of people, well, I don't want to straw man everybody here, but, there's an idea that if someone did something a certain way in the past, you could say, well, that was right for them, or it was a different time. You've heard these phrases before. And some people aren't like that. They're like, no. There's objective, real reasons why what they were doing was wrong and they should have known it.
Sure.
Now, if we apply that same logic to us now, it means that we should also look to the future to see what people are going to think about or try and predict it, so that we can better predict how we should act now. Okay. And if that's the case, so if combining these things, all right, the way that the future might dictate how we should think about what we're doing now, and how technology affects how we feel about what's right and what's wrong, then we're getting to the situation where what emergent technologies will dictate how we feel about what is right and what is wrong now. Now, does that mean that if you can predict in some reasonable fashion what technologies might appear in the future, you can better predict how people will feel in a moral sense about the way we do without that technology, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to think about. I don't want to make any conclusions about it because it's too complicated for me. But it's certainly a question I wanted to raise. Yeah, I think there's moments in there that kind of talk about science. So So each time we were shown through scientific rigor that these creatures that look just like us are somehow inferior, but every single time we were wrong. So
Yeah.
it talks about science and in the way that I'm talking about technology now. So you see that there's a slight disconnect in the way I've phrased it and so on. But that was partly influenced by this guy, Stephen Jay Gould. He was like a popular science writer, and he wrote a book called The Mismeasure of Man. And basically his issue was that, I don't know how long it was before he wrote it, but there was a long time ago, there were some scientists that were trying to work out the biological differences between races. And one of the ways they did that was by measuring the space in the skull. And
Right.
some guy decided that, after he'd measured a whole bunch of different skulls from a bunch of different peoples, that he could predict how intelligent a person would be by the size of the space in their skull, and that if there were differences between ethnic groups in the size of the skull, then you could predict the differences in intelligence between ethnic groups. Now, Stephen Jay Gould obviously took a big issue with this. I think he's almost been universally praised with trying to fight the kind of racist ideas that was the case. And the way he did it, though, was that he took the research that some of these old guys had done, and he said that they did a bad job of the science.
The mismeasure of man treats one particular form of quantified claim about the ranking of human groups. The argument that intelligence can be meaningfully abstracted as a single number capable of ranking all people on a linear scale of intrinsic and unalterable mental worth. Fortunately, and I made my decision on purpose, this limited subject embodies the deepest and most common philosophical error, with the most fundamental and far-ranging social impact for the entire troubling subject of nature and nurture, or the genetic contribution to human social organization. Stephen Jay Gould.
And so he went and explained how the different measuring techniques they did could be faulty, and that if they did a good job, they wouldn't find the difference. The criticisms of that, and I felt a little critical of that myself. And it's not that we're trying to sneak some racism into our science or something. It's more that I guess he was trying to defend science in a general sense, because he was saying that these guys weren't doing good science and coming up with bad conclusions, but that they were doing bad science.
Sure.
But since then, people have criticized Stephen Gould over the way he looked at their methods, and they have gone back and looked at the same skulls that the guy looked at and said, oh, the measurements weren't so bad. And so it's kind of said to me, I think it's almost a little sketchy to hitch your wagon, as it were, scientifically to the way that science does things, because evidence comes and goes a lot. And it's almost kind of important to have some baseline apart from that, where you can say, all right, if I can believe that humans are equal in some metaphysical way, then no matter what new evidence comes in and new data, and they measure some other thing just to say that we're different in the worst way, none of that will make a difference to how we actually should feel about each other, and how we should treat people and so on. So I feel like when Stephen Gould did that critical analysis of that that research, that he kind of erred, because if someone can criticize the way he was doing it, in his zealous defense of science in general, then it might undermine what he was saying about the other stuff, the race stuff.
Yeah.
And so the point of including those lyrics in there is to say that even if science comes up with some measurable way that people are different, and it doesn't have to be race, it can be any kind of thing. You can measure a whole bunch of different things. We should never forget that in every case that we've come up with in the past where we've found that science supported something that we now consider terrible, we've overthrown it in some way. And so I think I was just kind of saying in there as well that as science changes, technology changes, I guess it's important to come up with a few things that we can try and be solid about now, so that as things change, we're ready. I think people do get hung up a little bit on scientific data. Like, obviously, I don't want to undermine evidence for as a good way to, a good way to choose what you believe. Obviously, evidence is really important, okay? But the way that science changes over time means that we shouldn't hitch our wagon so closely to any one thing, and that it's like you shouldn't adopt something as part of your personality that's likely to get changed and criticized later, because you'll take it personally almost.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's a call to have an open mind, even on things like science. Or it feels weird to say something like that because it feels like I'm trying to undermine it, but it's not that at all. It's just that we need to accept that things change, and we need to be ready for those changes. And rather than resist those changes by having new evidence come in and say, no, that's wrong, and try and shut it down, or, we need to be ready to accept anything that comes, but know how to deal with it when it does. There's a lot more that I've said there than is in the lyrics. I've used more words than I've just said, but those are the themes that I was thinking of, and I don't know why. I think there might be fewer lyrics in that song than there are anywhere else on the album, and I think it was just. I guess this song is more of an emotional exploration of those ideas, although it does mention, specific varieties of the things I'm talking about briefly. And I guess that fits well enough if it's an emotional exploration, because it's a song that more plays into an emotional feeling of things, or not necessarily less emotional or more emotional. It's just like different, because these are a bit more melancholy, whereas all the other ones kind of basically angry. So that's what I was thinking about. So I don't think it was particularly well articulated, and maybe I could come back to those ideas and flesh them out a bit. I think some of that comes across.
I think after your explanation, it's definitely worth revisiting.
So I must have written this song last because that's how I did everything else, right? So I must have known then that I was writing for a ballad, I think. So it must have in some way influenced me in the way I thought about how I wrote it. But I think that's good. That's fine. It's like it's another opportunity for us to lay down that we can do things in a different way if we want, and it's not going to affect how people feel about what we do in the future.
There's some heavy stuff in that explanation that you said, particularly when you think about the way things have changed, or popular belief or perception has changed over time due to emerging technologies. And then when you think about, the right side of history, or the winners and losers, I guess, in the way things have panned out, and what side of history that we might be on, which, however, almost thinks like whatever change has happened, like major change, has been a radical movement. And then you think about radical movements now, and the conservatives are not, they're not a fan
of change generally.
Of change generally, and quite often the progressive views are often subdued by the conservative power or majority until something radical happens. So you think that?
I think I think you're right. I think often people kind of maybe put a little too much emphasis on the radical shift, though, because I think that's like a tip of an iceberg. And actually, the people, a lot of the hard work that goes into making that radical change, it's actually come in a more underground, individual way. It comes together in both forms, I think.
So the radical part of it may be just a catalyst for a bigger change.
Yeah, or the most visible part of it that we attribute to where all the change comes from.
Yep.
But actually, there's a lot of people working really hard underneath that you don't see and that you don't realize.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
They're really, they're the unsung heroes of whatever change occurs. But yes, you're right. Obviously, there's a big iceberg tip moment where people can point to, there's the change. But I think it's the same in science. Like, people remember the really exciting paradigm shifts where, Einstein changes relativity, or, Copernicus or whoever works out the sun's, not going around the earth or whatever. There are these revolutionary things that occur in history and science, but most of science is not like that. Right. Most of science is very incremental change.
Sure.
And society, I don't know. It may be a similar idea, but I guess one of the things that we need to think about is that, at least I've seen commented, is that technology is progressing faster at a faster rate all the time. So the actual rate that it's changing is actually increasing.
Accelerating.
So if the rate is increasing as well, And if technology has an influence on how we feel about what's right and what's wrong, it means that for us to adapt is going to be increasingly difficult. If technology is advancing and it's got a factor in how we feel about things, then, I mean, even the progressive attitudes might have trouble keeping up with how much things change. But it's a brave new world. You know, we gotta do the best that we can.
These are unpleasant facts. I know it. But then most historical facts are unpleasant. Aldous Huxley.
And maybe that's, you know, a part of what I was saying here was like, we got to try and get some of this stuff right in our heads so that we can be prepared for what changes may come as best that we can. Yeah. If like it's not the case that it's right for us now, history will.
It's a different time now.
Yeah, it's a different time now. Exactly right. You know, if that's the case, you know, it's something worth thinking about when you decide what you're gonna do. Yeah.
Where's my hoverboard?
I thought they had that in the bag, more or less. You just have to.
I haven't got one.
No, okay, yeah.
But there's still sweatshops making phones. So we got a ways to go yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can't predict exactly how it pans out. But you know, we look at how the past is predicted today, and obviously they've gotten a lot of stuff wrong. But some people do get some stuff right as well. This is a quote in Richard Kelly film called Southland Tales, and they said, I think it's scientists are now thinking that the future will be far more futuristic than we first anticipated.
Scientists are saying the future is going to be far more futuristic than they originally predicted. Krista now.
Yeah, well, no hoverboard yet.
So yeah, and that's what I leave you with at the end of the album.
Excellent.
For now, and then we'll have to have some more music later.
What a gloomy, gloomy thing.
But may not realize how gloomy it is until I explain it to you, but that's okay.
Well, it sounds gloomy.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you explain it to me, it's like, oh man.
Oh, I felt emotions.
So
I felt all the wrong ones. Yep.
I just came here to bang my head.
Yeah. Hit me
Just
with
want milk
feelings.
that tastes like real milk. Oh, good.
All right, thanks, Nick.
Easy.